Both evenings' performances by our panelists will be available until the election is certified. We're here tonight to discuss the two questions that have been put on the ballot by the Board of Education, 4A and 4B, an MLO and a bond. Our panelists this evening have signed rules for the ballot forum. The last rule states, failure to follow the rules will be grounds for the panelists' immediate dismissal from the panel in the event. So just in case, nothing is going to happen, but you're aware of it if it does. All questions will be submitted either via email at daac@lewispalmer.org or in person via your index cards. Volunteers from DAC will be collecting those index cards, so if you have a question and you've written it, you can hold it up. Someone will come around and get it. If you need a pen, you can also just raise your hand and we'll give one to you. When you have written a question, we will give you a new card. So if you have a second question or a third question, you can submit those. Want to let you know that we are taking all submitted questions. The questions we're holding on to, but we may not be able to get to every question tonight, so please just be patient. The questions will be asked by the moderator to the panel, and audience members are asked not to have any interaction with the board members or any of the panelists. The moderator will ask follow-up questions from alternate panelists if appropriate. We're going to be considerate of everyone's time, and we will end at 8 o'clock. Our panelists this evening are Ms. Karen Broft, who has served the Lewis Palmer School District as superintendent since 2014. Ms. Cheryl Wangeman, the assistant superintendent, who oversees district finances and operations. Dr. Don Griffith, he'll be here joining us. He is the Executive Director of Monument Academy Charter School and has been since December of 2010. Director Chris Taylor was elected to the Board of Education November of 2017 and currently serves as the board's treasurer. Ms. Jackie Burhas is a community member representing strong D38 community. Mr. Brian Risley is the president and principal architect for CRP Architects, providing services for the new elementary school building project. And Mr. Derek Arahe is a community member with children in the district and has a financial background. This evening we are also joined by some other board members. So if I can have you stand, Teresa Phillips, Tiffany Upchurch. Thank you so much for being here. The following video provides a factual overview of the D38 MLO 4A and the bond 4B, both those ballot measures.
Lewis Palmer School District 38 has a strong tradition of excellence. D38 continues delivering excellence to the Tri-Lakes community and its students today, supporting student success now and beyond graduation. The Tri-Lakes area is growing. In light of the growth in this community, the D38 Board of Education is pursuing 2 ballot measures this November. This presentation provides relevant, factual information so that voters can make an informed decision regarding the D38 General Obligation Bond, referred to as bond in the remainder of this presentation, and mill levy override, referred to as an MLO. The school board's 2018-2019 goals state that they will engage in long-range planning for learning, achievement, safety, and facilities. The bond and MLO provide specific solutions for area growth and student and staff safety. The D38 School Board reached the decision regarding the bond and MLO after extensive study. This timeline illustrates the various types of research and community input that informed the board's decision. Early in 2017, a long-range facilities planning group consisting of current and former D38 educators, community members, parents, architects, and a demographer began studying current district facilities, building capacity, and expected growth. Numerous community open houses and deliberative engagement events, beginning in the spring of 2017 and continuing throughout the 2017-2018 school year, provided feedback from the community on the potential options for the district to pursue in order to accommodate the increasing student numbers. Driving through the Tri-Lakes area, numerous new housing construction sites now populate the neighborhoods. In April of this year, D38 requested an additional demographic study of the Tri-Lakes area from Templeton Demographics. Those findings reinforce the visual evidence of growth. In the last 2 years, new home sales have more than doubled within the district. Just a few months ago, there were 450 lots being developed, with 2,400 additional lots slotted for development. With all of these new houses come new families and new students. Many D38 schools are nearing capacity and are currently closed to out-of-district and out-of-boundary students. The Templeton Demographics findings state that D38 will have an additional 945 students in 5 years and an additional 1,789 students in 10 years. These findings influenced the board's decision to pursue a bond and MLO in November. In Colorado, K-12 education is funded according to the school finance formula. This funding is known as per pupil revenue, or PPR. Funding is gathered from taxpayers' property taxes and income taxes by the state and distributed to local school districts according to this formula. Local school districts are able to ask their communities for additional funds via bonds and MLOs. According to the 2017 Quality Counts Report, Colorado's per pupil spending is $9,471. This is based on 2014 audited data, the most current data available for a state-by-state comparison. This amount was below the U.S. average by $2,685. This places Colorado 40th in the nation in per pupil spending. The D38 School Board has proposed the following to address growth and accommodate student needs. A $36.5 million bond would provide a new elementary school, convert Bear Creek Elementary back to a middle school — the facility was built and served as a middle school for 9 years — and provide safety and security improvements to all D38 schools, including Monument Academy Charter School. Improvements include secure entry vestibules for all schools and intercom warning systems. Additionally, the Board of Education will designate $3.5 million of the bond for the construction of a gymnasium, auditorium, or similar structure to be built in a collaborative agreement with Monument Academy. In other words, the structure will be owned by Lewis Palmer School District 38, and Monument Academy will maintain management and full use of the facility. If this is not possible, said funds will be placed in the D38 capital building reserves to be used for future district construction or to pay off general obligation debt. These conceptual renderings of a potential elementary school are a result of the work of the Design Advisory Group and CRP Architects. The Design Advisory Group consists of board member Chris Taylor, district administrators, principals, teachers, and former staff members. This design could be used to build the new elementary school if voters approve and the bond passes in November. It provides a template that could be duplicated as future elementary schools are needed, saving additional architectural design costs. Although many voters are familiar with education funding terms, this information is provided to clarify the legal terms bond and mill levy override, or MLO. A school bond election is a request from a school district asking the community to take on general obligation debt. Proceeds from the debt are used to build additional facilities such as a new school or to make capital improvements on existing facilities. This is the proposed bond ballot language that the Lewis Palmer School District 38 School Board will put on the November ballot. Ballot language in Colorado is formal and dictated by law, so voters see the entire cost with interest of any measure. Shall Lewis Palmer Consolidated School District Number 38 debt be increased $36.5 million, with a repayment cost of not more than $66.3 million? And shall such district taxes be increased not more than $5.2 million annually? And shall such debt be issued for capital improvement purposes, including but not limited to making safety and security enhancements to all district school buildings, including Monument Academy Charter School, constructing and equipping a new elementary school. It bears repeating, the Board of Education will designate $3.5 million of the bond for the construction of a gymnasium, auditorium, or similar structure to be built in a collaborative agreement with Monument Academy. If this is not possible, said funds will be placed in the D38 capital building reserves to be used for future district construction or to pay off general obligation debt. The board is creating a resolution which states this and their other intents regarding the bond, such as a community oversight committee, types of security improvements, etc. A mill levy override, often referred to as an MLO, is a ballot measure that asks voters living in a school district boundary to approve the collection of additional school operating mills above what is required by the state of Colorado. Proceeds from MLOs can be used in a variety of ways, including salaries, operating expenses, and technology upgrades. This is the proposed MLO ballot language that the Lewis Palmer School District 38 School Board will put on the November ballot. Shall Lewis Palmer Consolidated School District Number 38 taxes be increased up to $1 million annually commencing in collection year 2019 through and including December 31, 2025, pursuant to and in accordance with Section 22-54-108 CRS, such additional revenues to be deposited in the general fund and used for educational purposes, including but not limited to increasing safety and security at all existing elementary, middle, and high schools, including Monument Academy Charter School, by hiring additional staff members devoted to the safety and security of students and to provide ongoing safety training to all staff. And shall the district be authorized to collect, retain, and spend all revenues from such taxes and the earnings from the investment of such revenues as a voter-approved revenue change and an exception to the limits which would otherwise apply under Article 10, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution or any other law. The ballot language states that funds will be collected through 2025. This means that the MLO sunsets or ends in 7 years. So, what will a $36.5 million bond and a $1 million MLO cost taxpayers in the Tri-Lakes area? An average home in this area costs $400,000. A homeowner of a $400,000 home would pay approximately an additional $14 per month. The bond costs approximately $9 each month, while the MLO would cost approximately $5 per month. An owner of a business valued at $400,000 would pay approximately $36 per month for the bond and $20 per month for the MLO. There are many reasons a voter might choose to vote for or against one or both of these ballot measures. Some arguments for the bond and MLO include District 38 schools are currently nearing capacity or are at capacity. Safety and security improvements and additional support personnel at all District 38 schools, including Monument Academy, would benefit all students. Having good schools in the district keeps our local economy strong. Some arguments against the bond and MLO include property taxes would increase, there is no guarantee of increased academic achievement, homeowner has no children in school system. Colorado ballots will be mailed beginning October 15. Every voter now receives a mail ballot at the mailing address provided through their voter registration file. If you have a Colorado State driver's license or ID card issued by the Department of Revenue, you may register to vote online at www.govotecolorado.com. If you are already a registered voter in Colorado, you may confirm your registration at this website. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6.
Thank you. The first question is for Director Taylor. How did we as a community end up with a $36.5 million bond on the November ballot and a $1 million MLO?
Well, after the Long Range Planning Committee did about 18 months of work, and then we got a second opinion from another architect, we determined that based on enrollment and current capacity, we needed a minimum of one elementary school. And we already had a site at Jackson Creek, so we worked on that. And in order to help accommodate the entire district's population, we'll be converting Bear Creek back to a middle school, and it all adds up. And then we've also had a request from Monument Academy, and so we tried to accommodate that. It all adds up to the $36.5 million.
Thank you. This message is for Superintendent Broft. It is suggested by some in the community that the district has excess capacity, so a new school is not needed. Does the district have excess capacity?
The district has some excess capacity at the high school level, but at the middle school level, right now, I can tell you that we're actually converting a lounge into a teacher's lounge into a classroom. We have people officing out of closets. We've converted offices into other learning spaces. We are completely full at the middle school level. And in order to not go to mobile classrooms, we made the choice to utilize larger class sizes in the spaces that we had this year. We won't be able to do that in future years. With regard to elementaries, we have some that are at capacity and some that are near capacity. And within Kilmer is about ready to get to the point where they're at capacity. Palmer Lake is actually the one that has probably the most capacity, but it's minimal at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Risley, how will the construction company keep students on campus safe during construction, and how will traffic be handled?
The way that the site is configured will allow construction access to occur in a couple of different ways. First, deliveries and major activity on the site will come and go at times that are counter to the school schedule. So there will not be deliveries or other major activity that occurs or occurs in conjunction with pickup and drop-off. And in terms of safety on the campus, that's obviously the contractor's first and foremost concern. So they have a staging plan that will very clearly delineate where their construction operations are going to occur and where students and staff and parents and visitors can come and go without being anywhere near a dangerous situation. They have a very clear plan to separate those activities, and a construction fence will be in place to prevent anyone wandering across that border.
Great, thank you. Next message is for Assistant Superintendent Wangeman. Where will the funding come for the new teachers and the operating expenses at the new elementary school?
So in actuality, first of all, what we will be adding is an additional middle school. So I'm, if it's okay, going to address this.
Absolutely.
In terms of a new middle school, because that's what we're going to be doing. Traditionally, there's two different ways that a school district will have funding to open that new school. And one way is to put in conjunction with a bond request, a mill levy request for operational expenses associated with that new middle school. The operational expenses that a school district would be concerned about is additional utility costs, costs for the principal and that administration, costs associated with nursing helps, as well as costs associated with special education teachers. Those costs for this additional middle school will be approximately $1 million based on work that the administration has done and based on the current costs at Lewis Palmer Middle School. Our Board of Education elected not to request an MLO, so what we've done is to begin to plan for the operational expenses added for that middle school. In the current year, we've set aside half of the funds necessary out of ongoing operational budget to fulfill those needs, and then half would be taken out of next year's budget so we could go ahead and open it up. It does bear to mention, though, that when we split the middle school into two segments, as well as move the 6th grade up, current 6th grade teachers, current 7th grade teachers, and current 8th grade teachers will be reapportioned, if you will, to match the student needs. So some of the current teachers at Lewis Palmer Middle School will move over into that new school.
Great, thank you so much. Director Taylor, why did the district wait so long for this to get this figured out? We knew the growth was coming.
I've asked that question myself at several board meetings. This particular initiative probably should have been on the ballot last year to add the elementary school and adjust the middle school because of the overcrowding that exists at the middle schools. Really, the only difference between what we're doing now and what probably should have been done a year ago is adding some funding for Monument Academy and the safety and security hardening, if you will, of all of our schools for safety purposes. I
Thank
can't answer why. I've asked the question, but I don't know why.
Mr. Rahe.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the capacity issue can be easily fixed by moving pre-K into a centralized area. Nobody seemed to address that. That would free up 10 classrooms and about 250 seats in elementary school, which would mean that we wouldn't need another elementary school for many years because that would give us a total of 500 empty elementary seats if we moved pre-K out and centralized it. However, that still would have a middle school issue with crowded middle school, and nobody's addressed or even asked about putting an addition on Lewis Palmer Middle School at all.
Thank you. Next question is for Assistant Superintendent Wangerman. How will it be ensured that Monument Academy will receive the $3.5 million written into the bond?
So the board was very specific when they passed the resolution regarding the $3.5 million for Monument Academy. The board specified that there would be working agreement between the district and Monument Academy in terms of design, and then some oversight in terms of ensuring that the $3.5 million went towards construction of the gym or the like facility. These kind of arrangements are not unusual between school districts and their charter schools. What you often see is joint decision-making in terms of design, long-term lease of the land, and then the school district paying the construction company directly for their part, if you will, of the overall campus for the charter school.
Thank you. Director Taylor, why wasn't there a competitive bidding process before the project was awarded?
Well, there actually has been a screening process, in fact, 2 screening processes that I've been aware of. One is to identify the right architectural firm, and we had applications from more than 10. We had interviews with 4, and then we selected CRP architects, and then subsequently we did the same kind of RFP for construction firms before we ended up selecting the current choice, which is, what's their name? I'm sorry.
GH Phipps.
J.S. Phipps for the construction firm.
Right.
GH Phipps is the construction firm.
Thank you for that. That was a group effort. Mr. Rahe.
I think that the problem taxpayers have with the way they chose the consultant is this way. The consultant is supposed to get an unbiased opinion. When the consultant is in the running to get the contract to manage the entire project, he doesn't have an unbiased opinion. He actually has a financial motive to perhaps come up with an alternative plan that's not necessarily the best plan. And nowhere in America do they ever hire a consultant who then comes up with managing the plan that he said should be implemented. It's just a conflict of interest, as simple as that. And that's what I think taxpayers are most upset about.
Great, thank you so much. Please, I'm gonna ask the audience, please don't distract us from, we're taking time out of asking your questions. So feel free to congratulate everyone when they're finished. Karen, Superintendent Broft, several families are opposed to 6th grade in the middle school. Is there a plan to help the community to understand the benefits of a 6th through 8th grade middle school?
So we actually did some work around a deliberative engagement process around 6th grade in the middle school or in the elementary school. It's almost been a year now since we did that. And interestingly enough, after we completed the deliberative engagement, most people that were opposed to 6th grade in the middle school changed their mind at the end of the deliberative engagement. Most were very supportive of that, just by providing some additional education about the fact that really it works both ways. The quality of the education is what matters, and how it's implemented is what matters. There's successful models for both, elementary as well as middle school. So we know that there's an opportunity to educate and support both our parents and our students. And our students are very adaptive to this, and I've actually been in 2 districts where we've done this multiple times, gone from 6th grade to being in middle school, back to elementary, and back to middle school again. And generally the kids adjust rather quickly. I think the concerns that we have around it can be mitigated by a careful transition plan for our kids, which our middle school is already talking about how they might do that, as well as our elementary schools. And keep in mind that many of our elementary school 6th grade teachers would be moving to those middle schools. And they already understand the environment that kids have experienced in their elementary school. So they're very, very well equipped to handle that transition for our kids.
Great, thank you so much. Director Taylor, my understanding is that the original recommendation was for 2 elementary schools. Why was the second one dropped if it's truly needed?
It's not a matter of it being dropped, it's a matter of when and where. And we have engaged demographic firm to help us identify where another elementary school may be required. As I said earlier, the current addition of 1 elementary school should have probably started last year, a year ago. So what we're doing right now is just level setting, if you will, current capacity based on current enrollment plus the projections over the next several years. So the long-range planning committee was right in their assessment. There will be a need for another elementary school. It's just a matter of when and where.
Thank you.
The enrollment this year is 7 less elementary school students than a year ago today, just so everybody's aware.
Thank you.
7 less. So we had a receding.
Thank you,
elementary.
Mr. Rahe. And I am going to have to, if anyone interrupts again, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a information night. Superintendent Broft, if the new school is built and the 6th grade will be a part of the middle school, what will be done with the extra seats at the elementary level?
Could you ask that again?
Certainly. If the new school is built and a 6th grade will be a part of the middle school, what will be done with the extra seats at the elementary level?
Well, actually, in the case of Bear Creek, we actually need those seats for other students. And if you recall, we are moving a large elementary school into a smaller elementary school. So we have to adjust some boundaries and do some different things to make sure that we can fit that many kids into a smaller elementary. Additionally, we're growing. We continue to grow every day. Even after our October count from this year, we're adding more students. Kilmer got 34 more students this year. So they are quickly running out of capacity. And while Mr. Rahe pointed out that we're 7 down overall, in some areas we're much higher. And so I just want to remind everyone that we continue to grow, and we have projections that predict that we continue to grow. So that enrollment by next year, there may not be excess enrollment by next year, or excuse me, excess capacity by next year.
Thank you. Director Taylor, how does this bond and MLO benefit people with no children in the schools?
Great question. So, I think one of the values of our community is the overall value is attributed in large part by the quality of the school system that we have. And so I think the entire community is benefited by having a great school system, actually. And that's probably one reason we have such growth is this is a great school district, and I hear it from lots of parents that they moved here specifically because of the Lewis Palmer School District. So it's it's good for the community because it increases the overall value of the community. And I think secondly, it also is busing going on around the district, so.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wongman, how will the money be spent? How will the money being spent be monitored and tracked for accuracy?
So, I understand people are having a hard time hearing me. Basically, there'll be 3 different ways that we're monitoring that money. The first way is through the construction management process. The construction company as well as the architect are required via contract to ensure that they submit payments and maintain the budget. On top of that, we will hire an owner's rep in Lewis Palmer School District 6. We're not a very large district, so we don't have folks on staff with architectural and construction background, so we'll actually contract that out. And a part of that firm's duties will be to make sure that they're managing the budget for us and watching that. On top of that, as we did with Palmer Ridge High School, and the district has a long history of doing this, we will have a Citizens Operation Advisory Committee. In fact, that committee is already starting to be formed. We have folks with a background of construction management at the Air Force Academy, another individual who's actually one of our former shop teachers at one of our high schools, as well as an individual with an extensive HVAC background. And they're already starting to look at the drawings that are being proposed and look at the grading plans and that sort of thing. And they will also be involved, and already are, in the possible budgets as the projects move forward should the bond pass.
Thank you. Mr. Risley, does the contractor have a financial penalty if the school is not ready on the first day of school?
Yes, excuse me. It's very common for a contractor in a situation like this to have what we call liquidated damages included in the contract. I don't recall the exact amount, but it's usually several $1,000s per day, per calendar day that the project is not completed. And so there is obviously an incentive for them to complete the project on time.
Wonderful, thank you. Director Taylor, the district owns Grace Best. Why was it not looked at as a solution to the current capacity issue?
Well, it actually was looked at multiple times and by multiple parties, and we've had multiple architects tell us why it is a better investment to build a new building than to try and refurbish this building. So it was looked at, and it was concluded that it wasn't the best option for the future of our school district's facility needs.
I'm going to ask you the next question, Mr. Arai, if you don't mind. If the bond fails, given the growth projected by the demographers, Metro Templeton, and the growth seen by enrollment so far this year, what do you suggest the district do to accommodate the growth?
This is a great question. But before I say this question, the reason Grace Best wasn't given a proper in the running bid was because the architects that were looking at Grace Best had a financial interest in getting the contract, like I said before.
Okay.
But what they're supposed to do is this. There's plenty of room in the elementary school. Even by the wildest predictions of the greatest growth by the demographer, we're supposed to grow 20 students a year for the next 10 years in middle school, which puts 200 more kids. To build an entire elementary school of 650 kids and open a 900-kid student school and jam 6th grade in and do all this shuffling around is completely unnecessary. What they could do is they could turn Bear Creek into a K-8 by removing the pre-K that take up 5 classrooms. That would free up 120 seats, which is 6 years of middle school growth.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wangerman.
Can I say one last thing? I'm sorry. I also want to say that what they've done at Bear Creek is unfair to parents, students, and teachers. They actually closed a 5th grade class this year, and they now have only 5 instead of 6 5th grade classes with 30 kids in each class. However, they did add 16 new pre-K and a new pre-K class, which is very disrespectful to teachers and students alike. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wangerman, I understand the need for the proposed projects. Please explain why the increased population that is creating the need for the project is not paying for them by the additional property taxes they're contributing?
So certainly, the additional property taxes brought on by the new homes does increase our assessed valuation, and therefore does spread the proposed debt to a higher number of homes, a higher number of businesses, and so every single homeowner that's currently in the district would pay less than if those homes and those businesses were not there. That being said, we have a lot of folks, and perhaps this is where that question comes from, that come from other states where when a new home is built, a sizable amount of money is contributed towards the infrastructure costs, including new schools, that are associated with the growth in the area. Here in the state of Colorado, the dollars provided through each new home for folks in the county, I'll talk about El Paso County, are approximately only $400 per home. So if you do the math and say each home provides 3/4 of a child, you realize with $400 and you want to build a 650 student school, you don't have near enough dollars to construct the school. So therefore, the Board of Education is forced to, when building new buildings, go out to the voters and ask for additional debt. So in this state, or in this county, it's $400 for a new home every time a permit is pulled, and in the town of Monument and in the town of Palmer Lake, it's approximately $1,400 per new home.
Thank you. Superintendent Broft, how does open enrollment work, and which school currently has the highest number?
Right in front of me, I don't necessarily have who has the highest number. It's fairly equal throughout the district. It would only be by 2 or 3 students that one would be higher, other than Monument Academy, because Monument Academy has a significant number of open enrollment because they don't have an attendance area. The way it works in Colorado is by law, we have to open our doors for open enrollment. A law was passed in Colorado that allows choice for all parents and students throughout the state of Colorado, and there was only certain conditions under which we can deny open enrollment for a student. If we can't provide programming, in other words, if it's a student that needs significant programming that we don't have space for, or we can't provide that level of programming without increasing, getting more FTE, more teachers to support that student, or modifying or constructing something new to meet the needs of that student, we can deny them open enrollment. Excuse me, full-time equivalent. So, thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to use jargon. So we really can't deny students that want to enter into our school district unless we are full. And full has to be described as we are unable to meet the needs of those students coming in either through their scheduling at the high school level or space, or we would need to hire additional teachers to address that. When 1 or 2 students come in open enrollment, we can't argue that we would need to hire additional teachers for 2 students. And if they only come in 2 at a grade level, it's really hard to argue that you need to add another teacher for that. So really, we've set some caps as to when we don't take any more open enrollment, and several of our schools actually are closed for open enrollment. It's harder when we already are getting the per pupil allocation for that student and it's choice enrollment across the district, because we can't say you can't, we can say you can't move to this school, but we do need to keep that student because we're already getting the per pupil allocation for that student. There has obviously been an increase in the number of students in our district. So in many cases, we aren't taking open enrollment from outside the district anymore, except for at Monument Academy. We do have students that have been in our district for a while that are open enrolled. And because we actually examined this, we would only be hiring 1 additional teacher at 1 grade level to meet the needs of who we have open enrolled, because these 200 students that we have open enrolled are spread out K-12 amongst schools, amongst grade levels, and it doesn't add up to be 200 students all in one place. And so the reality is we've got We're meeting the needs of choice, and that was the whole point of that law, was to allow parents to have choice to cross the borders of schools and school districts. So, excuse me, that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wagaman, have you looked at adding classrooms onto the current middle school?
Yes, we have looked at adding classrooms onto the current middle school. We also, the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee actually looked at adding classrooms at all the elementary schools to see if there were any other options available as they went through the work. The issues associated with the middle school was the actual physical location of availability of land, if you will, of where we could add additional classrooms on, as well as the fact that the school was built for about 900 students. So,
Please go on ahead.
okay, so the lunchroom, the gym, the locker room, the bathrooms, the music room, all those common spaces are made for only 850, 950 students. So to squeeze additional students into them would make us do things like have, could we stop for just a minute?
Yeah.
Could we take
Thank
a break,
you.
perhaps?
Yes, actually, let's take a break for a moment, please. Communities questions asked. There is not a bias on this moderator's behalf. We ask the questions that are presented. So what's happening is this, can I please? My screeners over there take questions, they take your index cards. They may consolidate questions, two questions that are close together into one question. They are not, and we will have available all questions that were presented. We don't throw those out. Now, if she makes a mistake writing something so that I can't see it, then that may happen. All questions are kept, and they are all kept from last time as well. All right. I
So-
apologize.
So what I think I'd like to add to that is it's not just the classrooms, it's also the common areas, the gyms, the lunchrooms, and having enough space for the kiddos to basically pass in the hallways. If anyone remembers, before we built Palmer Ridge High School, passing the hallways was actually a nightmare, and no one but the kids would dare to do it because you take your own life in your hands. And so the common areas are also a factor. But yes, they were looked at, as well as the grade schools, to see if additions could be made there as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Could I add something real quick, just to get a word or
Yes.
two out there? I just want to say, I was actually at the middle school today, talking with them about this issue. It is very hard for the kids to get through the hallways. They can't use their lockers because they can't get to their lockers and get to their class in time. The thing I think that struck me the most was that they're already today starting lunch at 10:40 and going to 12:50 and eating lunch in shifts because they simply don't all fit at the same time. This is exactly what we saw at LPHS before we built PR. I talked to people who went to school back then, and they immediately nod their heads and understand what we're facing.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add to her point. I understand her point very well, but let's keep in mind that Lewis Palmer High School is a 1,400 capacity, and they didn't build another school till there were 1,900 students in the school. That's 500 over capacity, and right now Lewis Palmer Middle School, I believe, is what, 20 over capacity? So the correlation between the two kind of doesn't make sense. Thank you.
And I would just add that in order to do that, it was a lot of mobile classrooms, and that would be what we'd be looking at Lewis Palmer Middle School as well. And given the safety and security nature of school right now, that is not a viable option for many of our parents or our teachers to have mobile classrooms standing outside unconnected to the main building.
But 66 million is
Okay,
a lot.
Mr.
to
Rahay,
ask.
please. Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wangerman, How are online students and homeschool students impacting capacity issues? Are they included in our enrollment projections?
Yes, they are, and I think that's an excellent question. First of all, the online students, we have online courses starting at middle school and high school, but obviously primarily at high school. And we have increasing numbers of students every year that choose online as a part of their academic career, especially at the high school level, and we think that's going to continue. So as the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee looked at where we would need additional seats, we are, of course, projected to grow at the high school level, but with the addition of Monument Academy's high school, as well as the fact that many, many students are taking online courses as well as courses at Pikes Peak Community College during the high school years, it did take the stress off of our system. In terms of the homeschool academy, homeschool students, we do have a homeschool academy that operates out of the second floor of Grace Best Elementary. It is highly successful. We started it about 5 years ago with maybe 40 students. We grew from 90 students to 130 students this school year, and those students are included in our numbers. Of course, not included in the traditional elementary school numbers or Monument Academy numbers because they're at Grace Best, but they are included.
Great, thank you. Director Taylor, has the board elected to utilize an interest-only loan?
No.
Okay, that's a great answer, thank you. Let's see. Assistant Superintendent Wangerman, how would the financing of the bond work? How was the $14 a month calculated, and why does the ballot mention $66.3 million?
As a matter of fact, the Board of Education had a discussion about this the other day. Under state law, there are certain requirements that have to be in ballot language. And one of those things is the estimated total amount of debt service. And another thing is the largest expected payment to be made in any 1 year. So in choosing which numbers to use, the district recommended and the board agreed that we should choose numbers so it would allow for the most flexibility as we move forward and determine the actual final debt structure. The debt structure itself is based on quite a few different things. Number one, obviously, the board and the audit committee who advises the board would like to make sure that the payments for the taxpayers are fairly equal over time. Number two, they have to look at this debt for this new elementary school, but also look at the debt that the taxpayers are currently already paying off. That would be primarily the building of Palmer Ridge High School, as well as paying off Creekside Middle School and Prairie Winds, which were built in 2002. So the audit committee and the board want to make sure that all debt together provides for even tax payments, so the taxpayers don't have a huge surprise when they get their tax bill 1 year and then have less the next year and try to budget for that. And then they also have to realize, obviously we're a growing district, that we need to have space in the debt service plan for additional schools should they become necessary. So they have to weave that in. Then they take a look at any interest rate gains that can be made for the taxpayers and try to balance all that through. So long story short, the audit committee, led by our treasurer, Chris Taylor, and advised by an independent financial advisor, will create the debt structure after this passes and provide options to the board, and the board will make the final decision based on those options. It will likely come out less than the $66.2 million, but that gave the board maximum flexibility.
Thank you. And there's a follow-on question to this, so it's a separate question, but I'll address it to you as well. When will the current bond be paid off, and how will that change our taxes?
So we look at a structure that would go through 2038, so a 20-year bond.
Excuse me, I want to just clarify the question. Are we talking about the current existing bond or the bond proposed?
I can only read the question as it was presented, and it says, when will the current bond be paid off? How will that change our taxes?
And Chris asked a very good question. Our current debt service will be paid off in 2029. The proposed new set of bonds would be actually paid off in 2038 should we go with the 20-year process, which is what we're looking at right now. But that still remains to be seen. After the election would be passed, we have to look at the assessed valuation at that time. The audit committee would have to do their work, and then a proposal would have to be made to the board.
Thank you.
This was discussed in the community a lot about the payment of the bond. I think it's important to have an open discussion about it and have some more comments. May I make a comment?
Make a comment.
The fact that they wrote it to be up to 66 million and already put out a payment schedule that shows 11 years of interest only at 5% basically is the school district budgeting my finances in the future for me. And by doing it the way that they said, to come up with the $9 a month, the $9 a month is only good for 11 years, and then the price actually triples. They actually posted a bond schedule that came up with the $66.3 million. The fact that they say they're not going to do it now, they're not held by that by the ballot language. And they're trying to make us have even payments of taxes for the next 20 years. They're not my financial advisor. I can take it, charge me the right amount, save me the 15 million excess that current bond is written, and I'll manage it on my own.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for Mr. Risley. Is a premium being paid to build the new school in such a short period of time?
There are two parts to the answer. The first part is kind of a simple no. It's a little bit complicated, however. The material costs, which are the bulk of the cost for any construction, it's to the district's benefit, if you will, to construct it as quickly as we're constructing it. So I'll give you an example. In January, there will be probably a 15 to 20% bump in commodity prices, steel, copper, concrete, things of that nature. By being able to get the project bought out and under construction yet this year, we will save a significant amount of money in those escalating costs. Right now, we're seeing about 2 to 2.5% escalation per quarter, so roughly 8% annually. And again, by building the facility sooner, that represents millions of dollars of savings to the district. In terms of any other premium, by accelerating the schedule, the contractor has built in a contingency that will cover any unforeseen weather conditions or other things that we may encounter during construction. But the hope is that we'll have a mild winter or have some fairly easy sequencing during construction, and those contingency dollars, it's a very transparent process, those contingency dollars would be used then towards the end of the project to buy alternates, other things that we would like to include, but we're not 100% sure that we can include up front. So that would be anything from casework to additional playground equipment to any number of other things that we could sort of add at the end of the project.
Thank you. Superintendent Broft, could you provide your professional opinion on what's the impact to our students? This is grammatically incorrect, I apologize. Could you provide your professional opinion on what the impact to our students will be if the bond and MLO are not passed?
Well, I can speak from some level of experience in this, because when I worked in Douglas County, we did not pass a bond that was sorely needed during one time period. It was one of the few bonds we didn't pass. And the following year, we experienced a spike in growth that resulted in 35 kids in every first and second grade classroom. And I know I had several parents come to me and say, why didn't you tell us this would happen? And of course, at that point, I was a classroom teacher, and I said, well, I think that was an assumption that we could all make, that at some point, if we didn't have anywhere to educate, additional space to educate kids, we would probably have larger class sizes. And I do think that when push comes to shove and growth happens at an alarming rate and we didn't plan for it, as Mr. Taylor says, we have consequences. And those consequences come in larger class sizes, not only crowded hallways, but lunches that start at 10 a.m. and end at 1:30, 2 p.m. in order to get all the kids through. Because There's a capacity that's allowed in a basic lunchroom. There's a fire marshal capacity. And we can't have more kids in there than is allowable. And so you start having long lunches. If any of you have driven around Woodmore Drive right at the beginning of the school day or the end of the school day, imagine what the traffic begins to look like as you add more and more students to that site. It already can't handle the traffic that we have coming through there. So there is an educational impact because now we have 35 kids in a classroom. That's less attention that those teachers can individually provide for students. Additionally, we have students working in very congested environments and unable to access all the programming we'd like to give them, because what happens is you have to take away some of that creative programming in order to meet the basic academic needs of kids, because you're just trying to move kids through a day in a very crowded environment.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Is Monument Academy and their leadership in support of 4A and 4B?
Our board at their meeting in September passed resolutions in support of both the bond and the MLO.
Thank you so much. Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent Wagaman. Traffic at Bear Creek Elementary is already challenging, especially turnout to Jackson Creek Parkway. How will the increase in traffic be managed with the elementary and the middle school so close together?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that the elementary and the middle school will be opening and closing at different times. So, if you will, the timeline of the students on the campus will be spread out. The district is currently, regardless of this issue, working with the Town of Monument and the local governing authority, and I apologize, I forget the name, to look at adding a right turn lane into the school anyway. As a part of the process, the long-term facilities planning group worked with the group who actually did the work, and by the way, just to make clear, it is not the same group, they're not the same architect firm that was selected to build the elementary school should it pass. The group that did the pre-work was RTA. The group that was selected to build the new school is CRP, as represented by Mr. Usley tonight. But the long-term facilities planning group was very concerned with the traffic at Bear Creek and on that site, and what would it look like if we added an additional school. So traffic studies were looked at and reviewed, and the ingress and egress on the site was reviewed, and as the building plans have materialized for the new school, the flow of traffic has carefully been considered to ensure that the traffic on the site can be handled, and that the neighbors, because we do want to be a good neighbor, around the building aren't inconvenienced any more than they absolutely have to be.
Thank you. Director Taylor, why was the MLO wording changed from mental health workers to health wellness?
I guess, maybe Superintendent Broth could help us with that reply.
Certainly.
Here's the reality is right now we wouldn't even be able to get mental health workers for our students if we wanted to. There's a huge shortage of mental health workers out there right now, and most of them are getting snapped up by other organizations that can pay more. And so, first of all, the reality of that came to bear as we talked more about this. We also thought a lot about intervention for kids. And intervention comes in a lot of different forms. It doesn't mean that you have to be a psychologist or a social worker or a counselor to provide support to kids. It means that we need to have adults available to students who can help them with academic challenges, can help them with friend challenges, can help them if they're struggling to meet all the requirements of their classes. We don't want our kids to not have the relationships with individual adults that can enhance and support them in the many, many ways they might need support. So the idea of calling this a wellness intervention is really to capitalize on the fact that this won't just be mental health support. This will be support and more adult interaction for our students. And that's probably the simplest way to respond to that, is it could come in a lot of different forms. It's not necessarily a social worker, a psychologist, or a counselor.
And that actually just answers, I believe, the next question, which is in 4A, it says wellness support. What does this mean? Do you have anything else to add?
Not really, other than it also might be professional development for teachers to provide that additional support. It could be sources of strength. We have a peer mentoring program that's been very successful at the high schools, and we're adding it at the middle school as well. And so we're training not only adult peer mentors for students, but also peers to mentor each other and support each other and create a culture where we focus on the actual strengths that a child has in their life that they can count on during difficult times.
Thank you.
Could I just add something here? We're a very high-achieving district, but with that comes high stress. And we have seen in our surrounding districts, and we have seen in the increase in calls to the Safe to Tell program, that kids need some sort of supports. I think, in different school districts you need different things, but this is particularly important in our district, and it's a preventive approach rather than just a reactive approach. So there are a lot of us who feel like that's a good thing to add to the mix, along with security personnel and physical security, strengthening of the schools.
Thank you. And the next question actually is for you, Ms. Barajas. What or who makes up the Strong D38 committee?
That's one I can answer. So Strong D38 community is classified as an issue committee with the Secretary of State, and it's very typical when you have an MLO and or a bond to have an issue committee that supports it. This was true for the recent fire department bond mill levy that got passed. It's been true in the past. MA has had them for their MLO issues. We've had them for past bond and MLO issues. And what our mission is to educate the community about the bond and about the MLO, about the need to support the capacity and security needs within our district. So we actually have information available on the internet, on the web, on Facebook, that goes into who exactly we are. We are community members. Some of us are parents with kids in school now. Some of us have kids who have graduated. Some of us are teachers working on their own time volunteering, former board members both at MA and at the district. So probably about 10 people form the core committee. And then we get volunteers who help us get the word out, whether it's banners or signs or postcards or mailings. Those are the things that we're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Arahe.
Given the fact that you're marketing the bond at $9 a month for an average
Excuse
house.
Mr.
Yeah,
Arahe,
no,
can
the
I ask,
averaging house- Chris Taylor said they don't know what the bond is, so I'd like to know what their marketing materials are based on
and
where they came up with
Mr.
the
Arahe, that is a
calculation.
question that could be asked from the audience.
Oh.
And
I'd
that
like
was,
to say-
doesn't have anything to do with
Oh,
the
I'm
last
sorry.
question that was
I'd like
asked.
to say that their marketing campaign
So
is
thank you
marketing
so much.
something that they don't know what
Dr.
it is.
Griffin? What is the current timeline for groundbreaking for the MA High School? How will MA communicate their building efforts and progress to the Tri-Lakes community at large?
The opening is scheduled for August, I'm sorry. The opening is scheduled for August 2020. We have a 14-month build-out, and so the groundbreaking will probably take place in the spring. We communicate through our parents and through different media on an ongoing basis. We currently have a contract with the OCN to have monthly ads in there that are about half a page big, and so as that starts, that's what will be used.
Great, thank you. Superintendent Broft. If pre-K were centralized, as Mr. Arahe suggests, how would children and families become connected to their community school? Won't we risk losing their enrollment and PP funding for many years? Sorry, this is a long question. If pre-K is not local and convenient for a family, a student may not be enrolled in a pre-K, and that loss of a preschool experience can increase the cost of educating a student later on due to higher needs for interventions and supports. Short-term thinking can lead to long-term costs that hurt our community, property values. Isn't it better to invest in educating students now while it's the least expensive investment? So there's a lot of questions. Let's start with how would children and families become connected to their community school?
Well, I think that ideally, preschool, the opportunity to have preschool be a continuum and a part of the elementary school is optimal, because then the students go to kindergarten in the same school and they continue to build that understanding and that community within the school. There are some practicalities of centralizing preschool in terms of costs, and that comes particularly in the area of providing specialists. I think it's important to note that in the state of Colorado, through Child Find, we are expected to provide preschool to special education students that have been identified. And Child Find is identifying students that need additional support right from birth. And so we are required to provide free preschool to those students. We can provide tuition-based preschool to other students, but we have to maintain a specific ratio of students that are identified in special education versus those that aren't. So preschool requires the same level of specialists in-house that you would need for all special education students in another building. Centralizing preschool allows you to avoid having itinerant preschool supports that have to go from building to building, which is not as cost effective as centralizing preschool. And so the benefit is the ability for all the preschool teachers to be together and collaborate, and to have, in some cases, in some of our schools, there may only be 2 preschool classrooms. So it allows all of our preschool teachers to come together, plan and collaborate and learn from each other, and it also allows us to centralize the supports in a more economical manner and allows that collaboration among our specialists as well. So yes, there is a loss to the continuum, but there's also a gain on it in another way.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Wangeman, why was $500,000 spent already to CPR? Why? And what happens if the bonds don't pass?
And Mr. Taylor may want to add just a bit to this. I don't know, because ultimately that was the board's decision. But as the long-term facilities planning group moved through the process, they did realize that, in fact, as Mr. Taylor referenced, we're actually a year at least behind at this point. So as the process moved forward, we realized that given 8% annual increase in construction costs, that the longer we wait to get this building up, the less of a building we'll have, or the more it's going to cost the taxpayers. So it made sense to build as quickly as we possibly could. During the architectural RFP review process and in the architectural interviews, we actually had 2 different firms who said to us, we can get this building built quickly. We can open this building in August. And that, of course, was of interest to us, A, because we already have a very overcrowded middle school, and B, because of those construction costs going up much faster than inflation. So with that, if we were going to do that, we had to obviously have a plan. So the board went ahead and elected to go ahead and start to create the plans, which will be used for this next elementary school. And it's not, the nice thing about the plans, and this was also a thought by the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee as a group, is that this plan that's being created is actually a prototype. This elementary school, if you will, can be built at Jackson Creek, very similarly can be built at the next location and the next location for the next years to come, and we won't have to invest in those architectural design plans again. However, to do that, and to make sure we open in August, we had to go ahead and start with the plans, so we had to get underway. The funds for those architectural plans are actually being paid for by the cash in lieu, those building permit fees that we talked about earlier, the $400 and the $1,300 per home. So it's actually using funds reserved for new buildings and new land to go ahead and create these plans, which then we can use school after school after school.
And the second part of that is what happens if the bonds don't pass?
The bonds don't pass, the plans go on the shelf and can be used at a future date when the bonds do pass.
Superintendent Broft, teacher turnover has costs for the district. D38's pay is lower than surrounding school districts. If our educators are teaching in overcrowded classrooms, is the district concerned about returning and recruiting high-quality educators?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I can tell you that teachers begin to shop districts, and they know which districts have communities that are investing in the schools through bonds and MLOs, and they will actually ask that question sometimes in their interviews. When was the last time your district passed an MLO? Because they're looking out for making sure that there's a steady stream of support for their salaries and that they're not going to be teaching in overcrowded classrooms.
If I could add to that, D20 passed a $230 million bond MLO in 2016. D49 passed an $85 million bond MLO in 2016, and D11 just passed a $45 million bond in MLO. Douglas County is going for another one, so our surrounding districts are making investments, and it will, I think, put some pressure in this way on our teachers.
Thank you. Director Taylor, what is the district's plan to address growth if the bond fails? Address schools that are already at or above capacity, please.
I'm going to start and then defer to Superintendent Broft again, because she's laid out those kind of contingency plans. But in answering the question, if the bond fails, essentially it'll be resurfaced again in the next round, because the school that is being built has been planned 20 years ago. It's not like we just dreamed it up in the last couple of years, in the last 18 months. And I would be hard-pressed to think that another school somewhere else without the infrastructure that already exists at the Jackson Creek site would make more sense than doing what we're putting on the ballot. But as far as the contingency plans, I don't have anything that would be good to say about that.
The only thing I would add is it would definitely be mobile classrooms on the site, Lewis Palmer Middle School site. We would be taking up probably parking lot space to do that, which would probably amplify even more the traffic situation. So adding additional, we don't have a great deal of additional land at that Lewis Palmer Middle School site. So there's not many options for where we can put mobile classrooms. And that really is our solution, is mobile classrooms, particularly in that case, and larger class sizes. I do want to add that mobile classrooms, when the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee looked at those, the idea of adding mobile classrooms, they immediately began to remove them from conversation because of multiple factors, safety and security issues. Additionally, typically those aren't plumbed, and so kids have to go in and out all day to get in where they can get to a bathroom, et cetera. They have it's a really poor investment because they fall apart. The minute you move them, they start falling apart. And so it is a poor investment for taxpayer money to buy mobile classrooms because they don't last as long as a brick and mortar building. Additionally, creative solutions, like instead of having a smaller class size, a larger class size, and bringing in additional educational assistants instead of a teacher. A varied amount of things that we would do. Reboundering is definitely one thing, but that won't solve for some of our areas, especially down south where we'll be growing very quickly, and that's where the majority of the growth will be. So we will do our best to meet the needs that we have, but it won't come without a cost.
Thank
But
you.
there is a building downtown.
Mr.
in
Arahe?
existence.
Can we take a break, please?
Yeah, I'd like to know why you're so rude to him since the camera's off now. Every time that Jackie says something, and every time that Chris says something, and every time.
Thank you. The next question is both for Superintendent Broff and Dr. Griffin. How many students are choiced into the district?
We have actually Cheryl could answer this more precisely, but we have approximately 200 students net that are choiced in, and that does not include Monument Academy. So, Dr. Griffin, do you want to address how many are choiced in to Monument Academy?
Our 1,024, about 22% of them are choiced in from outside of district. Now, you have to keep in mind that once you choice into Monument Academy, we have a retention rate of about 95% from grade to grade. So if you get an out-of-district kid in the first grade, they're going to continue most likely through all 8 grades. And so that number is what it is.
Thank you.
Eh.
Excuse me, Ms. Bongwin.
To, I think, finish that question off, the other piece to that in terms of open enrollment is something we look at every year, which is the number of students who come into our schools as well as the number of students that go out of schools. The state of Colorado is a choice state, and as Karen mentioned earlier, we do have to have specific reasons for excluding enrollment.